Hello, guys. Today I would like to begin with a book by Mike Davis, uh, which is one of the most popular books and most cited ones, uh, which is used by historians, particularly the environmental historians who work on climate related histories. And Mike Davis, in his book Late Victorian Holocaust, has shown that how disasters are not just natural events, but they are, deeply historical processes, and they are shaped by, various human actions. So he has basically examined three major drought events, the drought phenomena that came in the 19th century. And these droughts occurred uh, you know, in 1876, 79, that is continuously for 3 years, then again in 1889, 91, and the third drought that he talks about is the 1896 and 1902 drought. So basically, what he argues is that these droughts were triggered by the ENSO phenomena, the El Nino South Oscillation phenomena. And these droughts, uh, as some kind of natural disasters, or what we can also say as climate related events, they led to the death of large number of people. So he has mentioned in his book that some 30 million people had actually died because of the three droughts. So, but the most interesting hypothesis of Mike Davis in this book is the analysis that he puts forward is that the catastrophe, uh, these droughts, they were not merely the result of environmental forces. He rather highlights how many people who died because you know because they were forcibly integrated into the modern world economic systems and the political structures that were created. So the uneven distribution of famine relief and the favored urban centers that serve the the imperial economy, these are important aspects of Mike Davis analysis. And he argues that how the government's relief programs neglected the rural population. So all these description reveal in Mike Davis book is that how disasters are not only shaped by nature, but they are also shaped by human decisions. And in this sense, disasters themselves becomes part of history. So, what follows them is often determined by social, political, and economic systems, um, and rather than the events alone. So, our story of this 1934 earthquake that we are going to discuss in detail today is quite close to this hypothesis of Mike Davis. We are going to discuss today is another case from the Middle Ganga Basin, and that is about the 1934 earthquake. So, the disaster history, I have been telling you a lot about disaster and why disaster is such an important theme for historians and how do historians read it. We have been talking about all this in earlier classes. Now, in our own time, what we are doing, that we are becoming now still people trying to join in. So we are basically becoming aware that our actions can have graver consequences. Humans, who yeah, even non-humans, they are everyone, they have consequences. It could be many of we have seen through the case of Easter Island that it could be even because of the anthropogenic factors. But then there are many disasters like the Tambora volcano. In the case of Tambora, we have seen that it was natural disaster. So the idea is that these kind of nature events, they deserve its own kind of a voice, and it is only very late in the 21st century that environmental historians have started to challenge the earlier understanding of history, that history can be written only on the basis of the records which talk about humans. So talking about the society or the politics or the economy and things like that. So there is a very famous book by John McNeill. He says that how environmental historians write history as if nature has existed, and they recognize that the natural world is not just the backdrop to human events and the human actions, or whatever, the politics, the economy, or the society. So it is actually history also includes many of the nature aspects, and I've given you the example briefly, the example of climate change in the past. That is going to be our next theme when we discuss in the classes. So these disasters actually make it very clear that environment can be something which can kind of precipitate significant events, and it can lead to difficult situations for the human societies, kind of a chaos, some kind of agrarian crisis, and different types of problems for the human societies. But then these different societies react differently to these challenges. All right. And at the local level also, you will see that there are different group of people reacting differently to a particular event or a particular natural catastrophe. So for example, the Tambora volcano that erupted in the early 19th century, it had its implication throughout the globe, but then the implications were different in different parts of the world. Right. So, these kind of challenges that we face, and the societies that faces the challenges, is actually making disaster as an important aspect of history. And that's why we always say that, reading about disaster is not disaster determinism or environmental determinism, because every society would then react differently to a particular disaster moment. So generally what we say is that these disasters, when we talk of disasters, it is not only the natural disasters that lead to problems or the devastation that it causes. Sometimes I give you the example of a disaster moment like the Easter Island case, and then you also have case in India, for example, 1770 famine. So many historians have worked on this idea that why 1770 famine should not be seen only in terms of what we say, the failure of the monsoon or the droughts. So there are actually, beyond droughts, there were other problems associated with 1770, and there were anthropogenic factors involved in it. So there were problems with the policy of the British government, who had just taken over Bengal, and they had got the Diwani right of Bengal in 1765. So just immediately after 5-6 years, you find a famine taking place in the area which the British have occupied. They have got the Diwani right in that area, and they have become that's why many historians write that there was a problem of the policy of the revenue collection that actually led to the famine. So Amar Sen has many times written about it, that disaster is something, the disaster like famine is something related to the failure of the state to provide food. So drought certainly creates a situation, but then when you are able to provide food to the people, it does not actually lead to famine. So they here the with this is a drought prone area. There are kind of recurrences of failure of the monsoon taking place quite often. After every 4-5 years, you will find the failures having taking place here in this part of Bengal. And so there are droughts taking place, but then the famine comes only once in a century. I mean, why is it happening? So there are problems, and that's why historians have looked into these aspects. So what we do is that, understanding these disaster, it is required for the scholars, the historians, to sometimes cross the disciplinary boundaries. So we have seen in the case of Easter Island that how the historians then took kind of a help from physics scientists. So there I mentioned to you about the forging of the two cultures of humanities and science. That's what we do in environmental history. So one of the essential elements in terms of the methodology that we have in writing environmental history, and particularly related to disaster, is to include to read many of the conclusions drawn by the scientists, which we use as one of our sources. So, the evidence also comes from the archives of nature. And I told you about the proxy data that is available in the sources. So we have archives of societies and we have archives of nature. So the archive of nature, for example, it includes I told you that it includes the tree ring studies, the ice core studies, the kind of various kinds of sediment records that we have. And these, for example, the study of the ice core and the records that the scientists give us, these help to find the kind of the past disaster events, like the even volcanic eruption. Similarly, tree rings can show us the amount of rainfall that has taken place, or the lesser amount of rainfall that has taken place. So we have discussed all this in the earlier classes. So earthquakes, floods, droughts, these are, this could be studied in a better way, not only with the chronicles and the records that we have, but also along with many of the information that the scientists give us. So they give us a basic idea, understanding of these natural catastrophes. But then, for the historians, the most important and interesting part could be the aftermath. So when we investigate the droughts, we as historians can use, the data provided by the scientists about the sediments, the sediment records, along with the tree ring records. This can be a corroborative kind of a source for us, because there are references in historical records about the droughts in a particular year. So I told you, in my case, when I studied 17th century India, and I tried to understand that 17th century is also a period which is a thriving period for the Grand Mughal Empire. But then you have frequent mention of droughts in many of the Mughal accounts. So what is happening? How is it possible that, in the continuous drought years, 2-3 years of drought years, immediately after that, Shah Jahan has been able to build the Taj Mahal? Why it is happening? These are the few of the questions that triggered my mind to understand the 17th century in a better way. And then I used many of the data provided by the scientists to understand and corroborate all these, references, smaller references in the chronicles and other historical records. So the historical records, basically what it does is that it can identify the year, it can tell you the exact sometimes dates and sometimes time period, and that when actually it has happened. But then the data provided by scientific could not, maybe sometimes they are not very accurate in terms of dates and years, but they are quite close. They give you a kind of a trend, and these become very interesting and very important for historians to understand the normal trend that are taking place, because then there are gaps in many of the historical records. So sometimes when there are droughts taking place closer to the Delhi, closer to Delhi, which is the capital city of the Mughals, but beyond Delhi there may have been drought or failures which might not have been recorded by the chronicles. But then if we read this along with the the data provided by the scientists, it will give us a kind of a trend that what was happening during those years. So what we need to do today is to having this kind of a background, what we do is that we try to study about an earthquake which came with very massive intensity in Bihar and Nepal in 1934, and that is very significant for us, because I told you that disasters too have some kind of a substance to trigger historians to write history. And I gave you the example that sometimes these aftermaths are so very important, and it makes history much more interesting when we include these disasters to be part of our history. So so I normally you will see in the case of the earthquake of 1934 that this earthquake has not occurred in any kind of a political vacuum. Any disaster, if you read any of the disasters of the 18th century, 17th century, like for example 1770 famine, it has not occurred in a political vacuum. You just cannot write about a famine or only in terms of the deaths and the disease that it led to. There was actually politics also very much associated with such kind of disaster moments of the 18th century. Similarly, when you are talking about 1934 earthquake, it is quite impossible that you don't actually try to understand the politics of the time, because this is the peak of the Indian National Congress working and trying to get its foot all around India. So nationalism was growing, and then Indian National Congress was at its helm, and then trying to trying to create its influence on the societies. So the politics is so very important when this disaster takes place, and disaster, so in that sense, is closely associated with politics, the kind of economy that is there, and the society of the time. So we have seen in the case of Tambora and other disaster in our case studies that how the economy and societies are associated with it. Now, humanity has confronted a persistent kind of a such natural disasters, the catastrophes, and these include not only earthquake and volcanic eruption. There are also examples of cyclones. I gave you my own case study of 1864 cyclone. And I told you that as a history researcher, why 1864 cyclone is just not a natural phenomena. I mean, it has something to do with the politics. So there is a political economy also associated with it. There are destructions happening. So cyclones have been taking place quite frequently in Bay of Bengal, but 1864 cyclone made a difference. I told you the story about it. So there are flood events which could have a good story to write. I mean, the forest fires that have taken place in the past. So, despite the substantial and very far-reaching impacts of these events on, societies and civilizations in the past, what we have seen is that the historical accounts and the mainstream history writing have often been ignoring all these aspects in the discussion. That we have seen in the 20th century, nobody has tried to write so, in detail about these disaster events and the aftermath of it. Now, this lacuna in the historical records is largely because of, our tendency as historians to underestimate the role of, natural disasters. Because we believed in till the 20th century that such natural disaster or any natural disaster doesn't shape the historical trajectories, which is wrong. And so historians all around the globe, in the US, in Europe, in many countries of Europe, and even in South Asia, historians have started taking a lot of interest in how society respond to events like earthquakes and volcanoes and many other things, and similarly for cyclones and floods. So you will get a lot of case studies of flood from European countries. So these are important part of historians' analysis in Europe. Most of these historians, they caught these natural phenomena, in earlier 20th century as of a lesser significance, because they thought that these are just, incidental ones. They are just not so very central to the unfolding of the historical events. So they thought that, just because they are, these are not done by humans don't have any role to play in that. So let us not include that as part of history. But we have seen that, they actually create certain situations for the humans to react in certain ways, and different societies then react differently. So the administration would react differently, the local society would act differently, and the political organization would react differently to the same situations. So that's why, this work by, I mentioned to you about a work by Eleonor Marcussen. She has written about this book. She has written a book called The Acts of Aid, Politics of Relief and Reconstruction in 1934. And she, kind of provides a very comprehensive historical account of the relief and reconstruction efforts by not only the colonial government, but also by the political parties and various social organizations of the time. So that work is so very interesting in that sense. Now, let us see, what is this event? The event is an earthquake, a massive earthquake that came on 15 January 1934, and the time was afternoon, 2:13 p.m. And so this is all recorded. You have a lot of archival record available to us. We have those records which tell us that there was actually a massive earthquake, And the worst affected regions, although the impact was felt as far as the Deccan area and far north also, but the worst affected areas were the districts of the mid Ganga basin, particularly Muzaffarpur, Darbhanga, then you have Champaran. So if you look at this map here, this darker side is the darker area is the one which has been most affected. So all the regions, these are all the regions south of the Ganges, the Ganga river, and they suffered the most extensive human losses and damage. Now, this is something, it has been estimated that the intensity of this earthquake was beyond 8, so 8.1 or 8.4. So it was somewhere between 8.1 and 4, which is so very massive. So even if today there is a earthquake which comes with a Richter scale of 7.5, it creates havoc. Now this is much more than that. So 1934 earthquake is actually, it was a devastating one, no doubt about it. Now I told you about a very interesting story associated with 1934 earthquake, and that is often remembered for the kind of reaction that came from Mahatma Gandhi about the way he has interpreted this earthquake that had killed many people in Bihar. So he believed that this was an event which was of divine intervention, and then Rabindranath Tagore reacted to it. So Gandhi kind of made some sort of a disputed claim that the earthquake was a quote unquote divine chastisement of Bihar, and this was for the kind of untouchability that the people from Bihar follow. And then Tagore reacted. He was critical of this kind of an understanding that Gandhi had about an earthquake. So तो ये जो रिएक्शन है कि गांधी ने जो कहा कि भाई ये सिन था, जो लोग वहाँ रहने वाले लोग थे, ये जो अनटचेबिलिटी वो लोग फॉलो करते हैं बिहार में रहने वाले ज़्यादातर लोग, उसी का ये सिन है और इसके कारण ये आया. टैगोर कहते थे वो साइंटिफिक आइडिया और रैशनैलिटी में बिलीव करते थे. सो ही सेज दैट दिस इज एन अनसाइंटिफिक काइंड ऑफ अ स्टेटमेंट. So there is also a discussion on whether the earthquake was caused because of the bad treatment or the untouchability that people from this part of India followed. So their treatment to the Harijans, what Gandhi would call the lower class people. So and then Tagore, for that matter, in his opinion, the cause of earthquake is much more scientific. So it has something to do with the nature events, and it has nothing to do with the kind of sin that Gandhi is talking about. So from a very disaster studies point of view, Gandhi's this kind of a interpretation offers and it gave an opportunity for historians to understand how people actually react, and what is the perception that the people carry. So perception of human agency in disaster can be different within the local regional level. So how the earthquake became incorporated into the contemporary political discourse then also becomes very important, because Gandhi is reacting to it as a as a sin of untouchability because of the political environment that was in place at that time. So that's why, this kind of understanding of a disaster, tells us that there is much more to understand for the historians when they are discussing about the earthquake of 1934. Now, I told you that the work of Eleonor Marcussen, Acts of Aid, is one of the most recent work on disaster history. So she actually, what she has done is that she has exposed the kind of weakness in governance and the that the colonial government at that time was in power. So the destruction that is caused and the kind of problems that the societies face, it actually exposed the problems of the governance itself. But then it also created some kind of an opportunity for different political parties of the time to reshape the power dynamics. So this case of Bihar earthquake actually demonstrates how the Congress or the Indian National Congress used disaster and the relief of disaster. So because Congress party was when this disaster happened, it was quick to respond to the disaster as for the relief. So the INC used disaster to relieve and to build the political legitimacy within the society. And then it started, then the colonial government started realizing that it is actually becoming more and more popular. So in a way, it is trying to challenge the colonial authority. And that's why then the colonial government also realizes that they should also get into the relief measures. So this book is all about the politics of relief that 1934 earthquake had triggered. So the response to disaster is it is never kind of a just a humanitarian problem, or it is because it is deeply it's not only about the deaths, it is not only about the the crisis that it creates. It is also very deeply embedded in the political struggle of the time. So we have these struggles, the politics going on, because early the 1930s is a peak period of the politics of the national movement. And that's why the natural disaster also, I told you in the very beginning, that natural disaster in that sense is, kind of, it occurs in a political kind of a environment where the very management and the consequences, these are all shaped by different competing political interests of the time. Now, according to the official narrative, if you read the documents and the archival records that we have, government was not able to respond very swiftly about it. When the 1934 earthquake came, because the response of the government was, in some sense, it was hindered by the destroyed infrastructure and even the administrative buildings. So it actually created some sort of administrative chaos. And in this situation, the colonial government then tried to prioritize its its relief. So colonial government, for the government at that time, the British government at that time, the priority was security. The priority was mobilizing the people, the police, for the rescue operations related to the administrators, the officials. And as a result, what has happened, uh, the relief which should have been there for the common people, it was not adequate enough. And then enters the Indian National Congress. So the gap that the British government created in providing relief was then grabbed as an opportunity by the Indian National Congress. And this gap in governance allowed people like Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who went on to become the first president of independent India. The emergence of Rajendra Prasad as a political leader, it has many things to do with the kind of work that he has done in the aftermath of 1934 earthquake. So, along with many other leading Indian National Congress leaders, he had taken charge of the relief operations in Bihar. And he, with the support from other Indian National Congress leaders, he began organizing various relief operations. And then he also was able to form a very a particular kind of a relief fund, which was known as the BCRC, that is Bihar Congress Relief Committee. So it is a committee which was formed with the purpose of collecting funds and then the organizing the relief, right? So what the purpose was, that this BCRC, Bihar Congress Relief Fund, they would coordinate efforts through various local, regional and national relief associations, and they will bring fund from there. And then with the kind of collection that they have made, they would then provide aid to the people who have been affected. So basically, this strategy and the very formation of the BCRC, it helped the Indian National Congress to actually create some kind of a broad network within the society. So if you look at the details that Eleonor Marcussen has provided, she has written about the kind of politics that is taking place. And she in a way argues that the programs undertaken by the Indian National Congress, it actually created and gave a kind of a force to nationalism in early 20th century India. So various Congress affiliated groups such as Gandhi Seva Sangh and even the Servants of India Society, which were earlier engaged in largely in education and healthcare work, they now also enter into these relief measures after the earthquake. Now there is a in the 1920s, Indian National Congress was basically had already been strategizing on some kind of a parallelism in governance. So they were, forcing the British government to, to include them into governance, and then they were also creating some kind of a pressure. Now, British government prevented Indians from, establishing their own government, and in some sense, what we see is that the Indian National Congress created alternative institutions, just to suggest to the society that they are, when the government has failed, they are ready to give solutions to the people. Now, this kind of an unofficial policy, which was already taking shape in the 1920s, that the Congress was trying to provide a parallel or parallelism in governance, that gave a kind of a force, an impetus after this 1934. So 1934 earthquake has given kind of a momentum to the Congress idea of parallelism in governance. And there is a work by William Kurasina and on the disaster relief and the kind of a politics that was going on at that time, and the Congress, how the Congress relief operations complemented the government efforts. And then in that sense, the Congress was in a way also exposing the shortcomings of the British government. So by stepping in where the colonial government had failed, this is a kind of message that the Congress was sending, that they have, wherever the colonial government has failed, the Congress is ready to give solutions to it. So basically what we have seen is that the Congress had positioned itself as the real guardian of the people. And that is something which we find so very interesting in Marcussen's work. And there is another work by Kokila Dang, which has been who has expanded on this idea, and she has argued that the Congress actually, because of this 1934 earthquake, it was able to gain credibility in a much more effective way in this part of India, this part of Eastern India, because it was earlier, from the very earlier times, it was in the 1920s itself, it was criticizing the British government. And then came the 1934 disaster, and this disaster relief that they came up with as a solution, as a tool in the formation of VCRC and many other organizations. This gave a kind of a force to the Indian National Congress. So the basic idea is that the disaster forces political systems to respond, and that's why the aftermath of the such disaster events are interesting, because the aftermaths are if at all it is the society is fully charged with political events of the time. So the aftermath of such disaster event like earthquake are highly political also. So the politicization that has taken place, in terms of, I'm talking about the relief measures. So just because Congress is so much involved in the relief, so the kind of the politicization in terms of relief, for historians, it becomes an interesting point of analysis, right? So, and then you have various organizations which get into these relief measures. So the idea is that these natural disasters created political opportunities. So earthquake-like situation created political opportunity for the Congress. And the BCRC was used as a tool for getting into the society and getting close to the society, convince the society that Congress is for them. And it allowed, in that sense, the Congress party to demonstrate its ability to govern, and even in such extreme situations. So criticism of the colonial government was just not about its failure in disaster management. There was, kind of a broader failure which was already being discussed by the Congress government at that time. Right. Now, scholars, many various scholars have, tried to understand whether, such disaster events become politicized because, and is earthquake of 1934 is a unique case. Now, of course, 1934 earthquake has devastated the towns and the infrastructure and even the human lives. The cattle were killed. But then, the kind of political atmosphere that we see is, of course, unique to in this part. Because when this 1934 earthquake came, the political atmosphere was already surcharged. And so this 1934 earthquake created a space for political transformation. Right? And that is so very interesting for the historian. And so if you read Eleonor Marcussen, I will be sharing the book with you. So if you read the book, she demonstrates how political discourse was put into action by the Congress Party. So the Congress Party basically played a crucial role in setting up parallel disaster administration. Now, the Indian National Congress also, and for that matter, BCRC, the Bihar Congress Relief Committee, it took help from various other relief organizations which were in place in other parts of India. And it is not that when BCRC was working in coordination with the INC so very closely, and various other civil society organizations were also taking part and giving help to the Indian National Congress in the relief effort. I mean, the British government was not ignorant of this. So, the British government was closely monitoring their activities. So, if you read many of the archival records, they do mention about these, their understanding and the kind of, the involvement that the Congress Party has in these relief programs. And they knew that the government, although is involved in some other things because they have their own priorities, but the space has been taken over by the kind of a gap that it had created. It has been taken over by BCRC and the Indian National Congress. So this is, the kind of politics that BCRC and the Indian National Congress was into at that time. It was very much in the knowledge of the British government. Now, this suspicion, the kind of, because the government suspected that the Congress, the various Congress members, the political leaders, were also using this as an opportunity for political campaigning. So all this was in the knowledge of the British government because they had their own, the informers all around the area where this earthquake had affected. Now, this very suspicion extended to both the local and non-local Congress leaders. And so there were many other non-Congress leaders also involved in it. So this is something which was also in the knowledge of the British government at that time. And they knew that the Indian National Congress is trying to strengthen its political position. So so it's not that the government would sit idle, right? When the government comes to know about it, that the Indian National Congress is trying to get into closely into the political activities, and they are trying to buy the public support for the party through the relief program, then the government also enters into it. So they try to also provide relief. So then the government then tries to include and bring relief, funds from various European countries, and that becomes very interesting. So this kind of a political landscape that Eleonor Marcussen has talked about is very important for historians, and that makes this book much more interesting. Now, let me just conclude. I will, of course, share you the book. I've given you the broader outline of the book. I've done a kind of a small book review of this book, which was published in the journal Environment and History in the last issue, the very recent issue. So you can access that on JSTOR, or maybe I'll be able to also share with you the book review of the book. So you can read that. This will just give you a sense of the the broader summary of the book. I have given you the detailed outline, what is there in the book right now. But if you just want to read, just to, before beginning a book, it is always a good idea. As, young history students, I would always suggest you that when you find you want to read certain historical monograph or a history monograph related to environmental history or anything, just first thing you should do is to read a book review, a good book review of that book. That would give you a very, the other way is to read the introduction of that book, first of all, to get a sense of the book. But even if that becomes a bit of heavy material for you, read the book review. And then the book review will give you an understanding of the book broadly, and then start reading the book in detail. So that's the way to go when you read these books, right? So, this book is also, it is also about, Nehru's involvement. So if you read that book in later chapters, third or fourth, I don't exactly remember, you will find that Nehru also enters into this relief programs. And then, Jawaharlal Nehru had strongly opposed the kind of collaboration that Dr. Rajendra Prasad had made with the government, because Dr. Rajendra Prasad had made a cooperation with the government and collaboration in some sense, saying that they will not oppose the government directly, because the very formation of BCRC and the kind of fund that they had raised, that would have been might not have been possible without the government, go ahead. So, and Nehru was strongly opposing this collaboration, right? So, all this kind of a contradiction that you find within the Congress party related to the 1934 earthquake, in the aftermath of the 1934 earthquake, particularly related to the relief work, is very interesting, right? So, because, Nehru had a different program altogether at that time. He called for the suspension of taxes, rents, because he had a idea in mind that the first thing that the government should do is to suspend all the taxes and, give relief to the people from all the rents, because this is an area which has been affected. So, this is the first thing that the government should do. But this is the demand from Nehru. Rajendra Prasad, on the other end, was into providing these reliefs. So there were, the British government were fearing that the Congress might exploit the disaster to, launch another kind of a non-cooperation campaign, because Nehru was always suggesting that we should not cooperate with the government. So even though the Bihar Congress Relief Committee agreed to work with the government, there were high tension within the Congress and within the government circle. So, the arrival of many of the released political prisoners, for example, in Patna, because many of the political prisoners who were earlier released by the government, they came to Patna and they got into the act of relief programs. Now, this was another concern for the government. So, and then there were many newspapers writing about it. Like, for example, Amrit Prachar Patrika was describing Congress relief worker as a, kind of a much needed army for disaster response. So these were the kind of statement that the newspapers, the local newspapers were making. And Gandhi, on the other hand, was praising the mobilization of the Congress party. So on the one hand, he had called it as a kind of a sin of untouchability for the people of Bihar. But then when the relief program started, he started, mobilizing. They said he started praising the Congress party. So there were many Congress members who had traveled from outside Bihar to assist in the relief work. But then one of the major demand of the Congress government, the Congress party, the Nationalist Congress Party, the Congress Party outside Bihar, was the rent remission and the relief from the taxes. Now, the government was fearing that, this kind of concessions that the Congress government is demanding, the Congress Party was demanding, this might, in some sense, could yield Congress political demands, which the Congress Party was already demanding about the parallelism in government. And so there was already civil disobedience movement in place earlier, and it coincided with the agrarian crisis in Bihar. And then this 1934 earthquake came. So there were, various other organizations, like you have a Kisan Sabha, the Bihar Kisan Sabha, which also then got into the act, right? And they started demanding remissions in rent or, also relief from irrigation fees. So, and then the kind of debt burden that they had. So, and then there were, these Kisan Sabhas, Bihar Kisan Sabha, they started even many at some places, they started also demanding for the abolition of the Zamindari system itself. So all this was being monitored by the government, and they were very fearful about it. And then that is why they came with their own program of, providing relief. So they also brought in much of the fund. They also got involved in the later part. What we see is that they also got into the relief program. And because, there were relief coming from social organization, not only from BCRC, but also from social organization outside Bihar. So because, like, for example, Ramakrishna Mission or Marwari Relief Society, all this, they were all giving relief and funding to the affected area of Bihar. So there were, Marwari Relief Society, Vivekanand Mission, which was very active in Calcutta, the Ramakrishna Mission, which was active in Bengal. So all this, they became active. Now, when it comes to, the policy that government came up with, I told you in the beginning that the government in the initial months was not in a position to start a relief program, because this is what the documents tell us, that they were themselves, the entire administrative circle was in chaos at the local level. But this could have come from, other areas of India where the colonial government was having a rule. So the documents that talks about, its failure, British government failure not to provide relief for, the administrative system itself in crumble in Bihar at the local level, is not convincing one, because there were the colonial government was having its rule throughout India. So, and the worry that they faced about the Congress involvement tells us about their anxiety that they were facing. Now, this situation then, of course, forced the government, the British government, to provide the relief in terms of the kind of relief that the BCRC was doing. But if you look at the relief that the government came up with, it was not exactly similar to what the BCRC was doing. So in later months, when the government actually entered into the relief program, much of their consideration was on the communication infrastructure. Like they started investing a lot on the roads, the railways, the telegraphs. So that is something which is very interesting, and that's so there are two types of approach that we see in the aftermath of 1934 earthquake. So the why they want to restore telegraph, why they want to reconstruct the damaged roads, because they thought that the kind of logic or the explanation that the government gives is that it is through these networks, the networks of communication, that they will be able to provide relief, which is not enough. How the local relief organizations were providing relief to the people. So that is something which is not convincing enough. And the hidden idea was that the security concern, which was in danger because of the destruction of the telegraphs and the roads and the railways, that was the main focus area for the British government at that time. Now, of course, there was some organizations like Reconstruction Department and Earthquake branch, which was created by the government, and then various European enterprises were involved. The government was able to then involve many of the zamindar landlord families from the area, like the Darbhanga Raj was involved into it, and then many medical associations like the Indian Red Cross and the Indian Medical Association that were involved in the disaster relief programs. So all this happened in the later months of the aftermath, but the initial month, it was largely the BCRC which was involved in the relief programs. Then there was also Viceroy's Earthquake Relief Fund created, VERF, which was a state-controlled initiative, and the colonial government basically the British government, through these relief funds, they in some sense tried to reassert the control, because they were seeing that the Congress party through BCRC was getting popular in the relief program. So they started promoting these VRFs, like VERF like organization, Viceroy Earthquake Relief Fund, for relief activities, and it was it then asks people to donate to VERF, like it encouraged the public donations. So although VERFs, when it comes to whether they were effective in providing relief, that is something which is questionable, which historians have investigated into. So the government relief on this kind of a public donation, we see that there were some kind of a financial limitations, and the kind of work that VRF tried to do was also limited. So what we see is that the public support for BCRC was much more strong than the VERF, Viceroy's Earthquake Relief Fund, despite the fact that VERF was a government relief organization. So basically what government was trying to do is that it was by creation of such BERF, it was trying to reinforce its political authority when they faced a challenge from Congress and the BCRC. And of course the credibility of the colonial government was declining, and that's why they took this measure. But these disaster relief program were quite different. The kind of relief that the British government provided were different, that we have already discussed. And so just to conclude all this, what we see is that the relief program undertaken by the BCRC and the Congress was in the rural area. They provided relief even to the landless agricultural workers, to the peasants, the poor people. But colonial government's priority was largely concentrated to the urban areas. So if you look at they undertook the work of road construction, telegraph, even sanitation, trade improvement. These were the focus area for the government. So much of the fund that was used by the British government through VRC was the widening of the roads and the reinforcing the bazaars that were destroyed. So if you look at carefully, what we see is that it is largely the urban middle class which is the focus area of the British government, and they did this because possibly they believed that the Congress government was getting very popular among the middle class, the urban middle class, in the 1920s and early 30s. So through their relief program in the urban area, they tried to reduce the popularity of the Congress party, and in that sense they ignored the rural area. But that was a gain for the Congress party in that sense, because then they were able to enter into the rural areas as such with their relief programs. So that is all for today.